So again, my name's Ryan Spring. I work in the Historic Preservation Department with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And at request, I wanted to share a little bit about our cemetery restoration program. So I'm going to go through this pretty quick. And then if you guys have questions, I can even hang around till after the meeting. It's however you all want to do it. But I want to make sure I get any questions you have answered. But there we go. So before I want to begin, I want to give a little bit of background on Choctaw Nation. So this is a map of Choctaw communities where they're located today and where they have been in the past. The blue dots up in this area are part of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. The green dots down here are the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And then the magenta dot is the Gina Band of Choctaw Indians. So these are all three federally recognized Choctaw tribes. We are all related in one people, but we have our own tribal governments. We have our own federal governments, constitutions, all that fun stuff. But because of history, we've all been separated due to removals and all that fun stuff. The dark orange coloring there in Mississippi and Alabama represents the extent of influence the Choctaw Nation had before removal. And then the yellow areas in Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas represent areas that Choctaw people started migrating to before removal because of settlement pressures in Mississippi, Alabama. And then the blue area is the land that the Choctaw Nation was given before removal with the Treaty of Doak Stand in 1820. Today, this is the Choctaw Nation, just this parcel here. And the tribe owns about 1.5% of this original land. So the majority of the land's been stripped from us by the federal government. So what I wanted to do was give a little bit of background on why we have a cemetery restoration program. The largest reason is for the abandonment of Choctaw cemeteries. And this is due to the relocation of Choctaw communities and families. During the early 1900s, the United States did a census of who they deemed to be Choctaw people. Due to our removal treaty 70 years earlier, the federal government was required to offer lands to Choctaws still living in Mississippi. This led to more government-sponsored removals in 1903. Choctaw Nation lands were dispossessed, and the Choctaw Nation government was greatly diminished. Choctaw communities and families were divided and forced to relocate themselves to parcels of land where they may have not lived previously. Choctaws were given land with equal value to 360 acres of good farmable land. So some were given more, some were given less, depending on the quality of land. Since allotment, most Choctaw people have lost these lands. As Choctaw communities and families were displaced due to allotment or later lost their allotment lands, these families have lost access to their cemeteries. Many times the land these family cemeteries were on is no longer accessible by the families. So basically, since the 1900s, since 1900, as allotment started, Choctaw people, families were living communally on the land. We were living in these family units and then in these communities. And the federal government came in and divided all of that up and displaced all the people and gave them, they checkerboarded us. And they gave us all our parcels. Because of that, some people were given land that was far away from their family members or community members, and that disconnected them from their cemeteries. And then, like I said, the majority of our people have lost their land over the last 120 years. And I won't go into detail about how that land was lost. It's quite sad, and there's quite a bit there. But what this has led to is speckled all throughout southeastern Oklahoma are all these abandoned Choctaw cemeteries. And our community members have a need to reconnect with these cemeteries and help take care of their family members and their ancestors again. The love we have for our ancestors comes from the Choctaw traditional value of love. Part of our traditional Choctaw culture is to continue to care for our family members, even after they've passed away. Our department works to assist our community members to continue this sacred duty. So, one of the largest core values of Choctaw people is the protection of our ancestors. And because of that value, it led to the creation of the Choctaw Nation Historic Preservation Department in 2002. So in 2002, the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma signed a memorandum of understanding with the National Park Service, allowing the Choctaw Nation to take on the duties of the State Historic Preservation Officer on Choctaw Tribal Trust land. Since this time, the Historic Preservation Department has grown to more than 23 staff and 7 programs. So this year is actually our 20-year anniversary. I just realized that this morning while putting this the presentation together. So I'm pretty excited about that. But we have our cemetery restoration program, which I'll go into more detail about. And then secondly, we have our Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act program. These 2 programs are directly geared towards protecting our ancestors. The cemetery restoration is is focused on protecting them where they're buried. Our NAGPRA program is focused on bringing them home from museums and institutions where they've been dug up and placed for research. The third program there is the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106. This is a federal document that allows the Choctaw Nation to consult on any federally funded projects, any projects done by a federal agency, or any projects done with federal funding. So every time a highway is to be built, every time a cell tower goes in, anywhere within the 9 states that Choctaw Nation deems our area of historic interest, we work with the state and those individual businesses, companies, whoever it is, to help make sure that no Choctaw graves are affected by the construction. Part of that also includes helping to protect the things that our ancestors left behind for us to learn from, aka archaeological sites, sacred sites, standing structures, all sorts of historic sites, across the Southeast. We as Choctaw people know and understand our history quite well. And so we try to work with these different states and agencies to share information that they don't have access to or points of view that they may not understand. And that way we can work together to help protect these sites. We have a tribal archaeology program. That's where I work currently. I'm an archaeological technician. We have 3 staff. We have a tribal archaeologist and 2 technicians, and we work within the Choctaw Nation to assist tribal members with any of their archaeology needs, but to also ensure the Choctaw Nation itself follows the National Historic Preservation Act. So anytime Choctaw Nation wants to build something, that goes through our office, and we make sure that we check the land before the tribe builds. And that's not just to protect Choctaw graves, but that's to protect the people that were here before us, which are the Caddo. We also have our community engagement and outreach program, which is technically what this presentation's through. We make sure that we want to engage and work with anyone who has an interest in Choctaw history and culture, and to help educate. We know that not a lot of Native American history is taught in U.S. public schools, and so this is another way that teachers and facilitators and students can learn more. In there, we also have our research program. So we have many finely skilled researchers within the department too. We have our cultural geographic information systems, our cultural GIS program. That's where I started with the tribe, and that is cultural mapping. It's going through and mapping all the different cultural sites that we have all across our 9 states. And then this fiscal year, so back in October, we acquired the Growing Hope Heirloom Seed Program. So we have a program that grows our Choctaw heirloom seeds, and then we get those seeds out to our tribal members to encourage them to start growing and utilizing these fresh produce in their homes. but also encourage them to start selling and marketing these produce just like we used to in the past. So I'll go into more of our cemetery restoration program, which I think is why we're all here, why we're all interested. These slides are very boring. I apologize. They're all text. It is what it is, but I wanted to make sure to focus on this content, and then that way, whatever your needs are, share this with you all, and then maybe we can talk later about, what it is that exactly that you're interested in with cemetery preservation. But the mission of the program is to preserve Choctaw history and traditions, as well as respect those that have passed on. The cemetery restoration program within the Historic Preservation Department works to locate, preserve, and protect Choctaw burial sites inside and outside of the reservation of the Choctaw Nation. So the majority of burials or cemeteries that we work with are in Choctaw Nation, but there are several Choctaw members that receive their allotments in Chickasaw Nation. And there's very few cemeteries over in Arkansas when Arkansas changed the state line to eat into Choctaw Nation. So there's a few towns that were in Choctaw Nation that are now in Arkansas that date back to the 1800s. The different legislation that our department uses to help with all this: any burials that are located on trust land or federal land are protected by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act and by the Archaeological Resource Protection Act. These apply to all federal lands. So if you're ever working with cemeteries that are on federal lands, like the Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, etc., these laws apply. We have burials that are located on state land, private land, and fee simple land that's owned by the Choctaw Nation. And those are protected under Oklahoma burial status. Alabama has its own burial laws. It doesn't, I have to look at Alabama's burial laws again, but they're a little bit different. They're geared towards protecting non-native cemeteries. But I think they promote, the looting of native cemeteries. That's still a big thing down in the South. For burials that are landlocked by private property, Oklahoma Statute 88187 provides visitation rights for family members. Each state has their own kind of visitation statutes. So what that means is that family members have a right to visit these family cemeteries. And so if there's no road connecting, then the landowner is required to schedule a time with the family so that they can visit. Most time in Oklahoma, it's not a problem. Most family members are very open to this. Sometimes the family members have to go through either city or county police to have them assist. I won't read all of this because it's a lot, but I can share all this with you too. It's all this is included in our preservation plan. It's a document our department's required to have, but it basically works as a strategic plan that guides our department. But these are the services that we offer free of charge. Cleaning. This is where we'll go in and help clean up cemeteries. So if a family member wants to start visitation in a cemetery that I haven't visited in decades, we can go in and clean up the area. Any trees that are 6 inches or less, we can cut and remove. We trim trees. If asked, we will fence the cemetery, and when we fence it, we make sure to put iron posts. So even if the fence goes away, those iron posts are concreted in the corners, and the cemetery won't be easily lost again. We can do a light spray to do regrowth if that's requested. We do a little bit of headstone restoration. So our program's been expanding. We've gotten training over the last few years to use a product called D2, which we can use to spray on the headstones and clean them in a way that doesn't degrade them anymore, but it helps protect them. We can also level headstones and do slight headstone repair, but it's left up to the families to replace any headstones if that's what they want to do. We also have a ground penetrating radar. It was purchased in 2008 by the Choctaw Nation, and it's been in our department since. We actually got a new one here a couple of years ago. But basically, it's a unit that goes along the ground and it shoots radar into the soil, and it will tell us if there's any anomalies in the soil. So if the soil is different in areas. So if you see an area of the soil that's 5 or 6 feet by 3 to 4 feet square, you know it's probably a burial. And so that helps us when we're in a cemetery identify unmarked burials, but also if the cemetery has a fence, we can go around the outside of that fence and see if any graves were missed when it was originally fenced. Uh, so we have a lot of requests. So back when this program first started, Choctaw Nation's Tribal Council um, helped us with kind of, what cemeteries are eligible for restoration and which ones aren't. So we do cemetery restoration work only for Choctaw cemeteries and burials. Many cemeteries in southeastern Oklahoma are mixed ethnicity, so cemeteries that are predominantly Choctaw may be eligible. We usually use a 50% or more, but it's really up to the discretion of the department. For large cemeteries where less of half the people are interred are Choctaw, restoration work may be done exclusively just on the Choctaw graves. And so if we have a request in a massive cemetery, but only a small portion is Choctaw, we may just do just those individual graves. Under most circumstances, cemeteries must be located within the reservation, except, as I said earlier, we have some cemeteries over in Chickasaw Nation in which we'll contact Chickasaw Nation's cemetery restoration program and we'll work with them on those cemeteries. Most of the time it's just, we just want to let them know we're going to be doing work in their reservation, and then we go out and we work with those landowners and those families. These are procedures. There's a lot of procedures here. Yeah, I don't want to read all this. This is just boring. Anyway, what basically happens is we get contacted by a community member, and we work with either the family or the landowner to get necessary agreements signed. So we need agreements that let us onto the land from the landowner. And then we have an agreement with the family to take care of the cemetery after it's been cleaned. So we only do a one-time cleaning, and that is just to get the cemetery prepped and ready for the family to take it back over. So yeah, these agreements are signed. We do before and after pictures to show, what work was done and to help document the work, just in case that needs to be looked at in the future. And then we make sure to document each of these cemeteries. We record family history, we'll record geospatial information on where they're located and put that into a map. And we get all this information together so that we can help protect these cemeteries, especially from federally funded projects like pipelines. Pipelines are notorious for going through the middle of cemeteries. So all of this helps us protect these cemeteries. Something else we've had to think about over the last few years is information access. So there are a lot of people that still think that it's okay to dig up and loot these cemeteries. For whatever reason, there's this thinking that Native American cemeteries have all this wealth and all these goods and all these other things, and that they're different from non-Native cemeteries. And in the end, we're all human beings, and these are all our family members. And so we restrict information about these cemeteries to the general public because we want to protect them. But family members that are verified that can show their connection to the cemetery, we will share this information with them because that information doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the family. So we want to make sure to share that with them because in the end, it's our community members that are the best ones for preservation efforts. That's why our department, we have worked with different DAR chapters before. And you guys are strong pillars of the community, and you work hard in each of your communities to help aid and protect your communities. And so that's why we like working with the Daughters of the American Revolution and other organizations, institutions, societies. This is just a quick look at our assessment and inspection agreement. This basically is signed by the property owner and signed by our department, and it's just a formal letter to show that we have jurisdiction to go ahead and go on that land just to take, just to do an assessment and inspection. This protects us and it protects the family members and the landowners. And then lastly, we have our cemetery cleanup agreement. This is the agreement that is signed next on exactly the work that's going to be done, how the work will be done. And so this is signed to allow us to do the actual work on that property owner's land. And then these are all filed and kept. That's all I have on our cemetery restoration program. That was quick. There was not a lot of pictures, not a lot of interesting things. And for me presenting, there are not a lot of jokes. So I apologize for that. But
thank you, Mr. Spring. We really appreciate it. And do we have any questions before he goes? Jane?
I just like to ask, could we have his email contact information from when we can maybe ask our questions individually, not take everybody's time?
Okay, I have a question, and one of our members asked if we could have your email address and people could ask questions from time to time from you.
Yeah.
Would that work?
Yeah, that's perfectly acceptable.
Send it to Gwyneth.
I have it.
Yeah. Oh, Gwyneth, could she send it to members? Okay.
Yeah.
You said it's acceptable. Thank you so much for sharing your information today. I grew up in Clark County, Alabama, and right across the Tombigbee River was Choctaw County, where many of the Choctaw people lived before they moved to Oklahoma. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Just south of us here, a little ways, there's the Choctaw, Cherokee, the council. Are they?
Okay. Another question. Just south of here is the Choctaw Cherokee Council. Question.
Are they related to?
Are they related to you all?
I don't think so. I have to do some digging. You said the Choctaw Cherokee, what was it?
Council.
Council. No, I don't. They're not a federally recognized. So I haven't had any interactions with them. In Alabama, the only non-recognized communities we've had interactions with is the Moa Band of Choctaw Indians down near Mobile.
Okay. And Choctaw County is just north of Mobile. Choctaw, Mobile, Washington, and then Choctaw. And Choctaw borders Mississippi. Thank you so much for your program today. Have a great year and keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you all. And y'all do the same. Like I said, you're good pillars of the community. So please keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.